Make sure I'm sharing audio. Yep. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna start off class watching this video about adding an else clause to our if statements so that we can decide to do more than one just one thing. So here we go.
Of course, some people will not be old enough. In these kinds of situations, we will want our programs to do something else when the condition is false. In order to do this, we will want to expand our if statements to include an else statement. The commands contained in this else statement only run if the Boolean condition in the if statement is false. In AppLab, you can add an else statement by either dragging out the if-else block or by clicking the plus symbol in the bottom right corner of the if block.
Okay, so that's the else, and as she said, the code that's in the else will only execute if the Boolean in the if block is false. Okay, so remember, the code in the if block will execute if it's true. If it's false, then it'll execute the code in the else block. All right, so let's go ahead and watch the next video.
Sometimes the decisions you will want your program to make have more than two possible outcomes. Let's continue our movie rating example, where we want to check whether the highest rating you can go see alone is an R-rated movie, a PG-13 movie, or just a G-rated movie. To check between these three different cases, we can add an else if statement. An else if statement is another condition that a program checks only if the previous if statements were false. So if age is greater than or equal to 17, write that user can see an R-rated movie alone. Else if the age is greater than or equal to 13, write that the user can see a PG-13 movie alone. Else, write that the user can see a G-rated movie alone. The else condition becomes the default condition because when all the previous if and else if statements are false, it will default to the else statement. Be careful as you construct longer sequences of else if statements. If you mix up the order, you might not get the behavior you intended. In our example, imagine we had switched the code so that the first condition checked if the user was old enough to see PG-13 movies, like this. This would mean that everyone who is 13 or older would be told they can only see PG-13 movies, even the adults. And with the next else if line, the computer would be looking for people 17 or older in the remaining group. This code misses the adults because they were true in that first condition. This won't work. The computer checks the conditions from top to bottom, so it is important to enter the most specific condition first.
All right, so as you saw, we can start making more complicated conditional statements that kind of have more than one branch, right? If we have two branches, we need if and else. If we have more than two, then we need this additional thing called an else if. And we can have as many else ifs as we want, but as she said, we have to be careful once we start having more and more branches because the order in which they are evaluated matters. We can skip a few things. We can skip things that we don't intend to skip if we don't pay attention to the order. And so we're going to start looking at an example that uses else ifs and elses. So please join me on the Pear Deck if you haven't joined it already. You can find the link in the chat. So as I said, we're going to look at the second version of Lemon Squeeze, the application we looked at last time. Same thing as always, if you want to click on this link and play around with the app yourself, feel free to. but I will also be doing that on my screen if you just want to watch me interact with it. So basically, I'm going to click on this link. I'm going to open up version 2. And before I even look at the code, I just want to play around with the app and see what has changed because this is version 2. They had a major update. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run this guy. It seems so far to be the same. I'm greeted, I'm told what to do to collect the lemons and avoid the limes. Let's click play. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of try to do the same thing. Click on the lemon. Okay, so far it looks pretty much the same, except I noticed that the lemon was really bigger in the beginning, and now it's starting to shrink the more I touch it. Um, Yeah, so it's getting smaller now, so it's like if it's really close to the lime, it becomes harder to avoid the lime. So let's go ahead and try that again. So again, you see the lemon is quite large, and now it's kind of the same size as the lime now that I've touched it about 5 or 6 times. Okay, so yeah, so basically, yeah, the major change that I see is that the lemon now changes size depending on how many times I've successfully caught or collected the lemon. All right, so what we want to do now is we want to take a look at the code, what has changed in the code. And so to do that, I want to scroll and I want to find the new segment here. Okay. Join the pair deck, you mean, Edward? Sorry, someone said that they could not join. Interesting. Okay. So, yeah, we're going to take a look at, oh, the class. Interesting. Okay. So, yeah, we're going to go ahead and take a look at this conditional block here. So I'm going to go back to the pair deck because I actually have an interactive slide we can work with. So I've basically taken a screenshot of that same chunk of code, but you can see it here in text mode instead of block mode. What we want to do is we want to practice creating a flowchart for this if else if statement. So we started practicing this last week, and now let's see if we can create our own flowchart based on this code. So what I want you to do is I want you to put in the Boolean expressions at anytime you see a diamond, and then tell me what happens when each expression is true or false. Okay, so I'm going to give you a moment to do that and let me know if you have any questions. And in a minute or so, we will come back together and discuss some of the students' responses. That's a good question, Savannah. So in this case, I don't see any ands and I don't see any ors. So these are not compound. These are just regular conditions. You do notice that there's more branches in this one because you have an if, an else if, and an else. So try to determine where everything goes. Give it your best shot, and then we'll talk about it together. All right. So in a moment, I'm going to go ahead and share some answers here. Don't worry if you didn't finish. Totally okay. I just wanted you to kind of think about the code and what was going on here in the added conditional. So I'm just going to share, let's see, just a couple, maybe three. Okay, so come back to the shared screen, and I'll go ahead and share what some of you all came up with. Okay, so I noticed I didn't tell you what the decision was, and I'm not sure if anyone really put the decision, but the decision is basically what size should the lemon be, right? That's our decision, and that's based on the score. So we noticed that if the score is greater than 10, if that's true, we're going to go ahead and set the lemon's width and height to 60. Awesome. That's absolutely correct. We get that from lines 23 to 25. But if this conditional is false, we're actually going to evaluate another conditional, this else if clause. And so that's why we have over here this branch that leads to is score greater than 5. Now, if this is true, we're going to go ahead and set the lemon's width and height to 100. Awesome. That's correct. If not, then we're going to go ahead and set the width and the height to 140. And by the way, the units here are pixels, right? Okay. So just take a look at some of the other examples here. I like this one, just lemon small, lemon medium, and lemon large. That works as well. Kind of just abstracted away all of the dimensions, the pixel dimensions. That works too. And then here's another way of looking at it out as well. Size changes to 60 by 60, 100 by 100, or 140 by 140. Yeah, so that all of these look great, right? So we're recognizing that we can potentially go down two different branches here. All right, so now let's go back to the code.org screen. And let's see, do we have to worry about debugging the size of the lemon when you restart? Yeah, I noticed that. It still shows the original size, right? Um, Not on this one. We don't have to worry about that, but that is a very good point. I noticed that as well. Feel free to do that later if you want to. Um, but let's say we do want to do this though. Here is a bullet point that says modify the program so that the lemon becomes even smaller when the user has more than 15 points. And so it says, look at the GIF below for how to expand an if-else if block. So it looks like we want to press the plus button here to add another else if. So basically, I'm going to show you how to do that. So if we're in block mode, it's really easy because we just press the plus. If you prefer text-based programming, feel free to just type in another else if. Okay, but I'm going to use the blocks because I know a lot of you are still using that, especially since this is a new block. So I'm going to go ahead and press that plus, and you'll notice that everything kind of gets kind of shifted up because now we have the else down here. Remember, the order of evaluation really matters. So I want to check for the biggest number first. So I want to check to see if my score is 15 up here in my if. So I'm going to go ahead and move down. I'm going to move down, oops, these things right here. Okay, so I'm going to move down my last else if down into my else block. I'm going to move the first else if stuff into the second one, which means I want to also move down my Boolean expression into here. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with my if. I'm going to go ahead and move the code from my if and the Boolean expression from my if. Okay. Because now what I want to do first is I want to evaluate if the score is greater than 15. So if you're doing block based, in order to find the inequality, the greater than symbol, I'm going to go to math and I'm going to look for it right here. Here's the greater than operator. So I'm going to go ahead and drag that into my if. and I'm going to go ahead and type score is greater than 15. Okay, cool. So what do I want to do? Yes, the order does matter in this case because I want to go basically from the largest score to the lowest score. If I mix these things up, say if I check to see if the score is greater than 5 first, that's going to catch everything that's 5 and above, and it's never going to evaluate if something is 10 or above or 15 or above. So it will always kind of skip these chunks down here. So that's why the order does matter. We want to go from biggest to smallest. All right, so what do I want to have happen? I want to make sure that my lemon gets even smaller. So they didn't specify exactly. So let's go ahead and just come up with a number that's smaller than 60. So I want to set my property, my width property and my height property of my lemon to be smaller than 60. So I'm going to go over to this yellow section. I'm going to find my set property, and I'm going to drag 2 of those into the new if that I just created. For both of these, the ID is going to be lemon. That's the ID of the actual image that is on my play screen. And one of these is going to be the width. The other one is going to be height. And let's say, I don't know, maybe like 20 by 20. I think that's a good number. Okay, so now if I get a score that is above 15, we should see that lemon get even smaller, 20 by 20. So I'm going to go ahead and test this out. Let me reset this. Play. Okay, so at this point it's 140 by 140. Okay, the next one should change it to be 100 by 100. Okay, cool. Let's see if I could do this. Okay, so now it's at that smaller size. Let's see, that would be what, 60 by 60? Yeah. And so now let's see if I can get above 15. Okay. Oh, it's so tiny now. Look at that tiny lemon. So now it's 20 by 20. Tiniest little lemon. And now, like, I think that it is unavoidable that I'm probably also going to be hovering over the lime at this point because my lemon is so small and it's on top of the lime. Yeah, see? All right. So I'm going to go ahead and lose. And then, such a pro, I know. And then as Miguel pointed out, when I click play again, notice that the lemon has not been reset in size. That's really interesting. So actually, yeah, let's take a look at why that's happening. It's not a requirement for this particular assignment, but let's take a look. What can we change to fix this? So maybe I want to take a look at what happens when I click the play button. Ah, okay. So when I click the play button, I see that it doesn't reset my yes, it's an esport now. It does not reset the dimensions of my lemon and my lime. So, well, I don't think the lime dimensions change ever, so we don't have to worry about that. But I could definitely click and drag a set property in here. I can find the lemon ID and I can change it back to the larger size, which is 140. I can do that for both the width and the height. So let's go ahead and do that. This is just for fun, by the way. You don't have to do this, but Miguel brought it up, and yeah, that was really interesting to me as well. So why not try to debug it? So let's go ahead and try that out. So this should, anytime we press the play button, it should reset the dimensions of the lemon back to 140 by 140. So let's reset that. Press play. I'm gonna go ahead and yeah, lose on purpose. I made the lemon a bit smaller before I lost. So now when I press play, the lemon should be large again. Awesome. Cool. So we fixed that bug. Thank you, Miguel, for pointing that out and Yeah, that was fun. Okay, so all I did was set the property back to those original values anytime we press the play button. That's how that bug was fixed. All right, cool. I think we only have one other thing to do before class ends. Let's go ahead and we already did that. Let's go ahead and let's see what she has to say about um, this next portion. I think she's going to talk about compound booleans. And then we'll really quickly look at how they changed lemon squeeze part 3. So I'm going to go ahead and play this video.
You can add even more complexity to your conditional statements by asking two questions at the same time. We use the and or operators to check two Boolean expressions at once. Let's talk about or first. If we wanted to, for example, express that you can be younger than 5 years old or older than 95 years old to get free admission to a museum, we could express that like this. Expressions that use the or operator are true if either the first or the second expression is true. Only when both expressions are false does the ORed expression evaluate to false. The AND operator is more strict. What if we wanted to say that to get the student pricing at the museum, you need to be between 12 and 21 years old? We could express that as checking whether age is greater than 12 and age is less than 21. If only one of these conditions is true, that's not good enough. Both conditions must be true to get the student discount. More and more complex questions can be represented with combinations of and or statements. What if the museum gives the student pricing to everyone if it's Tuesday or Thursday? But on every other day, you still need to be between the ages of 12 and 21 to get a discount. We could express that like this. If the day is Tuesday, or the day is Thursday, or your age is greater than 12 and age is less than 21, then you get the student pricing. Else, you get regular pricing. When using text, use parentheses to group Boolean expressions together. When evaluating this complex conditional, the computer will evaluate each Boolean expression separately, and then use the rules of and or to determine if the whole expression is true or false. So if the day is Monday and the user is 25, the code would run like this. First, the computer checks if the day is Tuesday. It's not, so that is false. Then the computer checks if the day is Thursday. It's also not, so that is false as well. Since it's not Tuesday or Thursday, and at least one side must be true for an or statement to evaluate to true, that whole expression evaluates to false. Then the computer checks the other side of the or, since that could be true. The computer checks if the age is greater than 12. 25 is greater than 12, so that statement is true. Now the computer checks if the age is less than 21. 25 is not less than 21, so that statement is false. Since this was an and statement, but only one side was true, this whole expression evaluates to false, and the message displays that the user gets regular pricing. For a human, perhaps this answer was obvious from the beginning, because we are actually pretty good at dealing with logic statements when they represent real-life decision-making. But the computer needs to evaluate every expression until it can determine whether the condition is true or false. Many beginner programmers make a mistake while trying to write this expression. Is the day Tuesday or Thursday? Notice the subtle difference between the correct code and this version. This is often the result of the fact that in English, we would say, is the day Tuesday or Thursday? However, remember that computer questions are different, so we have to ask, is the day equal to Tuesday or is the day equal to Thursday? So that the computer will understand. Computers do exactly what we program them to do, but with conditionals, we can simulate complex decision-making and have the computer adapt to changes, or even seem intelligent to humans.
All right, cool. So you can see that our conditionals, our Boolean, compound Boolean expressions in our conditionals can grow to be quite large. And so it's important to like group together things in parentheses to make sure that you're actually capturing the correct Boolean expression that you want to. So I know that it's just about 11:30. So what we will do is we'll save the part 3 of Lemon Squeeze for next week. On Friday, we do have a guest speaker. Um, I want to, I'm going to go ahead and postpone the homework that's due Friday for next week because that's just the check for understanding, but I want to go over part 3 of Lemon Squeeze first. So we'll finish that up on Monday. You'll have that check for understanding homework, and then we'll start doing the what is it, the practice questions also next week. All right. So I hope y'all have a good rest of your day. I will see you on Friday when we have our guest speaker. I'm gonna go ahead and stop this